I'm Barbara Rossing, and welcome to our closing panel. What a wonderful worship service. 31 years ago, I realize it was, I started my Master's of Divinity Studies here at Yale Divinity School. I came straight out of college as a science student, a geology major at Carleton College, but I took this other fork in the road, having received a Rockefeller Fellowship, to try out seminary. I took a course that spring of my first year at the Forestry School, and as far as I know, no one had ever done that. So it's so exciting now to see the two schools coming together, offering even a joint degree program, which I wish I could have done. I'm so grateful to be back after all these years. I will introduce the students who are our principal panelists this morning, who are the next generation that will carry us across the bridge that Gus Speth described last night. We're at the edge now, and we need a bridge to carry us over. It's been wonderful already in the worship this morning to see you students knitting us, healing us, mending us, stitching our leaves of hope and vision into this tree of life and the water of life image here. Thank you. It's very moving to me to see that. You students, let me just say, are so fortunate to have Mary, Evelyn, and John as mentors here at YDS and at the Forestry School. I will just say, as a New Testament scholar, they have been so important to me as mentors also, because 10 years ago they invited me to present a paper at the Harvard Conference on Christianity and Ecology, and that was early enough in my scholarly career that it really has made a difference in the trajectory that my own scholarly path has followed. And I would guess that many of us who are here who have written for the volumes in that series were shaped as in our own vocation as scholars by the way that you brought us together and invited us to take our work in this direction. So thank you very, very much. The essay that I wrote for that conference was the one on the river of life in the New Jerusalem of the book of Revelation as a vision of healing for our world. And I still believe that at the end of the Christian Bible, this angel, this messenger, takes John, the seer from Patmos, on this incredible tour, not of heaven, but of the earth, to see this wonderful vision of renewal for our world with a river of life that flows right through the middle of the city, this renewed political economy, the polis, New Jerusalem, and on either side is the tree of life with its leaves for healing. I still believe that vision of hope can really help us. But I also have seen over these 10 years the increasing peril that we are in as a world, and it's very scary. I was at a United Nations conference last summer in Tromsø, Norway, way above the Arctic Circle, for World Environment Day in early June. And there we saw the Arctic melting and heard scientists present to us, and we met indigenous leaders also who told us about the peril of all the snowy and icy places in our planet. We met indigenous leaders, Sheila Watt-Cloutier, who's done so much work in northern Canada. Here's one, Bishop Sophie Peterson, a Lutheran bishop from Greenland. Here I am, a Lutheran all these years. I had no idea there were Lutherans in Greenland. And it was wonderful. And she's an Inuit Lutheran bishop. And then they also had brought in young leaders from around the world who are being affected already by climate change. Young people who are working with the World Council of Churches Climate Change Program from Fiji and Kiribati, and to speak with these young people who are trying to do the kind of education among their communities that will have to lead to people leaving their islands, because these are islands that are going to be flooded. And then as they pose questions to me, how do you, as a Bible scholar, say that the promise God made to Noah, that I will never again flood the earth, how can you say that this is not still a promise, and what do we do? I also, at that conference, saw the scariest graph that I have ever seen in my life, presented by scientists. It's one, I've had a hard time finding it, but I just located online in a document called Climate Code Red. But this is a graph of the rate of Arctic melting compared to what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change presented as these various scenarios. So their whole range is like that, and then the actual melting is like that. It's far worse than even the worst case scenario projected by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, the book of Revelation also can deal with scary scenarios, as you probably know. Lots of images of destruction and really scary scenarios. The alternative vision to the New Jerusalem vision is this terrible Babylon vision of this horrifying trajectory that the Roman imperial world is on. This toxic tour, worse than the toxic tours that I take my students on in the south side of Chicago to see the brownfields disasters that industry has left behind, to see the landfills. I think the toxic tour that the book of Revelation takes us on to see the trajectory that the Roman imperial world is on and that we're invited to get off is meant not as a prediction of things that have to happen to our world, but rather as a warning or a wake-up call. That's how I read that vision, not how fundamentalists do as a kind of predictive scenario, but rather as this warning, much like the visions of the future that Scrooge is taken on in Charles Dickens' The Christmas Carol, where he goes out to see a future scenario, and then he finally is converted by that and says, "Spirit, Spirit, promise me that this isn't a vision of what must happen, but only of what may happen, and that I can still alter the course of my life before it's too late." We too need to alter the course of our life before it's too late. And that's what we will hand over to you students to speak with us about. The final chapter of Tim Flannery's book, The Weather Makers. I don't know how many of you read that. He's an Australian scientist who's written a popular, very accessible book on global warming. His final chapter is called Over to You. That is basically saying the science is now in, we know what's happening, now it's over to you, the rest of the world, to do what it takes, to do what is needed before disaster overtakes us. And that's the message that we heard at this conference in Tromsø, Norway as well. That's why the Church of Norway and religious leaders were invited, because scientists were saying to us over and over, look, the science is now definite. It's clear what's happening, but now it's over to you, the religious institutions, civic society, NGOs, communities of the world, to make the changes that we must make in order to avert this apocalypse. So we have to mobilize, and that's, I think, what we've been renewed in seeing again at this conference. We have to mobilize, and you students have to lead us to find that bridge that will take us over beyond that edge that Gus Speth says that we're at. And so now it's over to you, to Matthew Riley, to Joshua Ashton Hill, to Rachel Holmes, and Erin Lothes. Why don't I introduce the four of them, and then also Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm are going to make final remarks too. You've met them, you've seen them working really hard here at the conference. Matthew Riley is the Renewing Hope Conference Student Volunteer Coordinator and a student in the MAR Ethics program here at YDS. Hopes to begin a doctoral degree this coming fall. As a former middle school biology teacher and union organizer with the Teach for America program, Matthew is interested in continuing to teach at the university level and believes the linkage between religion and ecology is the most important moral and spiritual issue of our time. In addition to his work as the student coordinator for the Renewing Hope Conference, Matt is also actively involved with the Yale Earth Care Committee. Joshua Ashton Hill, who you've seen at the bookstore probably, is a second-year MDiv student who's been tailoring his coursework towards the ways that faith intersects with environmental issues. Grew up in the Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee, has always appreciated time spent outdoors, fostering his relationship with God through encounters with nature. Became serious about these issues after teaching at a United Methodist camp that ran a full-time environmental education program for 5th grade public school students. That experience propelled him to the Appalachian Trail, where he, his wife, and dog have walked 1,200 miles so far. Rachel Holmes is doing what I wish I could have done 30 years ago, a joint degree in the Divinity School and the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. I'm so envious. Born and raised in New Jersey, she majored in environmental policy and religion in college at the Cook College, the land-grant school of Rutgers University. She's engaged in environmental activism And as a Catholic woman, Rachel acknowledges her responsibility and privilege to care for the other, for human and non-human others, and has devoted her life to the promotion of environmental justice. Her calling came to her while on a trail ride with her uncle in the Buffalo Peaks Wilderness area in Colorado. And Erin Lothes, our fourth panelist, is a fellow at the Earth Institute of Columbia University in residence with the Center for the Study of Science and Religion. Erin's research focuses on how religious congregations are taking leadership in environmental awareness and conversion for a book on religious responses to the environmental crisis. She's the author of a book called The Paradox of Christian Sacrifice, The Loss of Self, The Gift of Self. Her ongoing research interests include reflection on human finitude, ecology, and environmental ethics, and interreligious dialogue on the environment. She holds a doctorate in contemporary systematic theology from Fordham University, a master's from Boston College, and a BA in English from Princeton. She's a member of the New Jersey Catholic Coalition for Environmental Justice. So welcome to our panelists, and we look forward to hearing first of all from Matt Riley.
Thank you for giving me the chance. Let me adjust this. How's this work? Well, thank you for giving me the chance to be here today. I feel very, very fortunate, very lucky to be around so many wonderful people that are here to make this kind of thing possible. And it truly means a lot to me, from the very bottom of my heart, to be able to work with the students here and to work with the people who are making this happen before us. What you're about to see from me is something that's supposed to come from my heart, and that's fortunate for me because I've been so busy this week, I have not had even a moment to write anything. So, yes, very honest, yes. So this will be the first thing that you've seen from me that's completely unplanned. When I was approached 6 months ago to be a part of this conference, I was all alone. I thought to myself, how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to get my student volunteers? And what's the conference going to look like? And lo and behold, the thing grew exponentially. We now have something like 47 student volunteers that have been working on this conference. We have hundreds of people in attendance. People have been going above and beyond and giving effort to make this happen. Some of you, especially Francis, thank you for making the eco-service happen for us. Amelie has been amazing and with the ushering, making sure people can get to the classrooms they need to be to the rooms they need to be to, putting the signs up. Many others as well have gone above and beyond. Rachel, the decorations were wonderful, thanks. Really nice. So I want to talk a little bit about personal conviction. All of us in this room today, all of us are here for different reasons, from different faiths, from different backgrounds. We're all here because we have deep convictions in our hearts, in our spirits, in our souls, that bring us here to fight for this cause, to help save our planet, for our future, for our children. Last night, Gus Beth gave us a very sobering reminder of the devastation that's happening to our planet. I personally felt very sad when I heard the ongoing list that he was reading of the loss of species, the loss of our planetary environment. It's very upsetting for me. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about my own personal conviction. And also, Sally McFagg reminded us also of the universe story of where we're coming from in this, where we're coming from as humans, where we're coming from spiritually, what brings us to this in the long term. And I think that's really important to consider the theology of this thing and the cosmology of this movement. And also, I was really inspired this weekend by the Renewal film, which reminded us of the interfaith aspect of this, as well as the importance of educating children and in building friendships and working positively for this effort. And I think now I'll transition to a story from my childhood, which I've actually never told to anyone before. And so even this element of my speech is completely unrehearsed and unplanned. So when you're a child, you know what it is to love. When you're a child, you know who God is. You know it from your heart. You know it from your experience. Children can teach us a lot. Children know about the sublime feeling of awe and wonder that nature can bring us and that spirituality can bring us. And I personally had a very unique chance to experience nature growing up in rural Indiana. I grew up on a farm in northern Indiana, just a small farm, and I spent my time running around the woods, sometimes barefoot, often with a sharpened stick, as Peter Evelyn kind of talked about the other day in a conversation. Boys will be boys. And I've come to realize that a lot of kids have not had that kind of opportunity. A lot of children don't have forests to run around in. They don't have open fields to play in. And they don't have fresh air and fresh water that they can splash in and play in and be safe out in nature and experience it. And to experience God and to experience love like that. But I did have that chance. I could experience it firsthand. And that's what brought me here today. That's what brings me my dedication and my sense of wonder in the world. And that's what makes me get up in the morning. It's what makes me happy, knowing that the world is out there and that it's good. The world is good. But I also know that we are hurting it. We're destroying nature. And by destroying nature, we're destroying a part of ourselves as well. We're destroying a spiritual part of ourselves. And that has to be changed. And that kind of change can only come about from personal conviction. So when I was a kid, running around in the woods with my sharpened stick, I have a lot of memories of the goose eggs that were nestled warmly in the sun next to the pond. I remember the sounds of the frogs, the lullaby that they sang, the creaking and the croaking and the chirping. And I remember the smells of the farm where I grew up. The smell of the animals, the smell of the trees, the smell of the flowers. It was a virtual paradise for a child. It was wonderful. But then I also remember when I was 10, maybe 11, I don't really remember exactly, but one day my friends and I were out in the woods and there were these stakes in perfectly straight lines with pink ribbons tied to the tops of them. And we didn't know what they were at first. We were just kids. We had no idea. And I went to my father that night and I said, "Dad, what are these stakes? Why are they in straight lines out in the woods, the pink ribbons?" And he explained to me that they were surveyor stakes, and they're planning on putting a subdivision out in that section of the woods that I like to play in. And that was very upsetting for me. That area was a very big part of my life, a very big part of who I am today, and it really made me the spiritual person I am today. And I asked my dad who was doing this, who put these stakes out there, and who's going to cut down the trees and put the subdivision in. And he named a man who lived nearby, who owned the property. And I knew this man. I knew him to be a member of our church. And as a child, I could not comprehend how someone who went to a church could do something so evil. Those are my thoughts as a child. It seemed outright preposterous that someone would want to cut those trees down and plow in the swamp and cover up the pond that I like to play in. So I asked myself, why would someone do something like this? And as a child, you can find answers, but you're not going to believe them. I knew that he had economic reasons. I knew that he had a family to feed. And I knew that the world is based on progress that we live in. But I could not understand morally, ethically, spiritually how he could do that. It did not make sense to me. So my friends and I we made plans to camp out in the backyard, as we often did. Very innocently, of course, my parents thought. And we went out that night, maybe around midnight, I don't really know, and we pulled up every single stake that was in that forest. Yeah. And not only did we pull up the stakes, but we broke them and we hid them. And I have never felt better in my life than that day. So as my life progressed, I'm not going to tell the rest of the story. As my life progressed, I was able to experience nature again and again and again, through hiking, through being in my backyard, through traveling to other countries. And every time, that same sense of wonder and joy and childhood bliss and understanding of God and what is right came back to me every time as I experienced nature. Every time. And at the same time, I've also been experiencing that same terror and that same fear and that same pain in seeing nature destroyed everywhere I go. It happens again and again and again. And that's what brings me here. It's a struggle for what's right. It's a struggle for our souls. It's a struggle for our world. It's a struggle for the child that's inside of us. And it's a struggle for God or whatever personal deity you believe in. It's a struggle, and it's an important one, and it comes from inside of us. It comes from the very depths of our souls and hearts. And I feel that every day. And that's what brought me to this conference. That's why I'm here, to organize the students, to give this speech, which I'm not practiced for, but I feel it's going well. So eventually I made my way to Indiana University, where I had a chance to take a class with Professor David Haberman called Deep Ecology. And that was the first time I ever saw my own beliefs being put into an academic system. And pretty much from the very first day of class, we were hugging trees. Literally outside hugging trees. We were conducting councils of all beings. It was a truly wonderful experience, and that's what brought me to the academic side of things. And today, I've just recently applied to PhD programs, and I'm hoping to go into a PhD program this fall and to continue this, so that I can go on to educate other students, much like my teachers, Professor Grimm, Professor Tucker, Professor Haberman have done for me. And I feel like it's a very important part of our future for our planet, because there are a lot of students out there who are very interested in this topic, in this movement, and we need the teachers out there to educate them. And that's where I hope to be in my future. But I just want to talk a little bit about also some lessons that I learned and how to approach our future. As mentioned before, I was in a group called Teach for America, and we had an inside joke in that. Well, Teach for America, first of all, the idea of Teach for America is that they bring students recently graduated from college into inner city school environments, and the idea is to educate students who are socially and economically disadvantaged, and to bring their education level up to the national standard, which isn't very high on its own, sadly. But we had a little joke amongst the Teach for America core members, and the joke was that Teach for America is not about teaching kids. Teach for America is about teaching you that you can't save the world. But what I learned through working through teams of teachers and through seeing my kids grow, I learned that we can change the world. One person is not enough. That's why it took 47 student volunteers to make this conference happen. That's why there's hundreds of participants here in this conference. That's why this room's halfway full today. It's an effort of all of us. It's a community effort. Thank you. All right, so just some basic lessons learned. When you experience nature and when you go about your daily life, do it with the heart of a child. Do it for the heart of a child. Remember the words of the song in the Eco Service? Walk in beauty. Do things with an open heart, and a sense of awe and wonder. When you go about your daily life, smile and laugh. It's important. It's very important. Enjoy the world around you and enjoy your time with your friends, because it's only through cooperation and friendship that you can make this happen. I wouldn't be able to make this conference happen, the student volunteers, if I wasn't friends with these people first. That's a key element, friendship. Tear up the stakes. There are cruel, questionably evil, and ill-intended plans out there to do things with our lives and our planet and our spiritual realm that we need to sometimes take a stand against. Do not be afraid to do that sometimes. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Rachel, you've been an excellent example of this throughout this entire experience at Yale Divinity School, constantly planting plants, constantly digging in soil, living in a dorm room that has worms under the bed. But my main message is just remember that you cannot change the world, but we can together. Always remember that, to work together.
I want to thank you for your words, Matt, and it's truly a testament to his character that he put off this intimidating experience planning for it in favor of the logistics. My script is evidence of the fact that I didn't have nearly as much to do with the planning as Matt and Rachel. So I want to begin by expressing that thanks and gratitude, which we've already done on numerous occasions, but just know that it's genuine and sincere. I want to thank Professors Tucker and Graham in particular for their work and their vision. I'm also thankful to Dr. Barbara Rossing for agreeing to mediate what promises to be a highly contested, emotional display of radical disagreement among bitter enemies. I also thank her for her strong work on hope in the book of Revelation. I remember the Welcome to College lecture of my freshman year at Emory and Henry College in Southwest Virginia. Every freshman packed tightly into an inadequate auditorium to hear some bearded guy make an analogy about moving from the kids' table at Thanksgiving to the adult table. As college students, we were no longer relegated to that table where our curiosities and opinions enjoyed no serious platform. By reporting at freshman orientation, we were growing. We were becoming something new. Oh, the places you'll go. Today, as a panelist, I feel like that's happening again. Thanks to a little courage, I accepted the invitation to come here and talk a little bit about next steps and ways forward for environmental theology. So I want to discuss my personal interest in the connections between religion and environmental concerns. More specifically, my aim is to express how my experience of the Christian faith motivates me to think ethically about my existence, both as a natural and as a cultural creature. I'm always at a loss for words when people ask me why I care about the intersections of religion and environment. It's difficult because the connections are so completely vital to everything that comprises my sense of moral identity and integrity. I literally cannot imagine what it would be like to call myself a Christian and not endorse some type of creation care or stewardship or eco-justice, etc. To sum up, I care about the intersections of religion and ecology because I'm religious and because I live in an ecosystem. And today is a good chance to flesh that out a bit. As you heard in the introduction, I grew up a faithful United Methodist whose parents took him hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park after church on a very regular basis. Sunday was the Lord's Day. That meant not only going to church, but honoring Sabbath by retreating from that which compromised the noise of life otherwise. I have a specific memory of hiking one Sunday afternoon. Here's my stick story. Having found the best hiking stick ever known to humankind, I had several museum curators come in and verify that fact. But I wanted to take it home with me. I wanted to possess it. My dad used the occasion as an opportunity for a little lesson in environmental ethics. Though I'm sure his intention was just to inform me that the stick was the property of the Department of the Interior and that I could be sent to jail if I took anything out of the park whatsoever, he communicated more to me than just a simple prohibition. He instilled within my cognitive structure a little space for respecting a place exactly as it is, for maintaining its natural state. Perhaps his was the most straightforward introduction to intrinsic value that I've ever come across. I recognize now the normative character of the preservationist rubric as formative base for my environmental value structure. Not only do I believe the natural world has value apart from its use to humans, but that belief developed as an outgrowth of Sabbath. From an early age, calling myself a Christian meant not only going to church, but also going hiking. The connection, therefore, has always been a natural one for me, though it was never brought to the fore of my thinking as a kid. This happened when I took a full-time learn-as-you-go teaching position at an environmental education instructor at the United Methodist camp. It was owned by the United Methodist Church, operated by the United Methodist Church, staffed with United Methodists. Yet we tailored our curriculum specifically toward the needs of public school fifth graders. So we taught classes in stream ecology, geology, trees, alternative energy, councils of all being. And those accompanied activities like canoeing, rock climbing, hiking, and camping. There was nothing nominally Christian or even religious in any of the language we used in those activities. We used an equal bit of care not to use political language. Often, however, students would voice questions that I could not answer honestly without the language of faith and policy. Holding my tongue, I realized that for two reasons, the language of faith is indispensable in the effort to avert ecological catastrophes. First, faith language provides our cosmological structures of meaning. And second, this language is often the same language we use in politics. A fascinating study conducted by Ben Mentier and Robert Manning, it was discovered that both the concepts of commitment to future generations and stewardship receive wide approval as political expressions of ecological commitment. I believe that the Christian tradition is well equipped with a system of language and symbols that captures the moral imagination of a culture whose interest is in stewardship and sustainability. So one central task of eco-theology is to revive traditional language and show how its ecological application provides a more robust telling of the Christian narrative. To address the concern for future generations, for instance, the language of covenant establishes God's eternal pact with humanity. And I shiver to think that as human societies continue working toward our own extinction, we work also to dismantle the grace resident in that promise of perpetuity. Likewise, the mandate to till and keep the earth is no recent idea. Stewardship is a core axiological principle of the biblical tradition, and it remains indispensable as a means for making meaning of our existence as creatures or as linguistic animals, as Sally McFaig said on Thursday night. I'm going to wrap up by offering another way in which I believe Christian theology and spirituality can be enriched by drawing on its most basic doctrines, and perhaps it is a way forward. I personally vacillated between vague theism and agnosticism for many years. And one of the reasons I call myself Christian today is the meaning that resides in the logic of Trinity. Many of us this weekend have rightly emphasized an essential human reliance on and connection with nature. But this and all relations are meaningless without preserving the distinctions between the related parties. We learn this from Trinity. Three yet one-ness is the essential structure of a relational God for us. And the person and relation anthropology Professor McFaig reaches for is expressed beautifully in the logic of the relationships of the three persons of the Trinity. These relationships are marked by a dialectical give and take, a simultaneous yes and no, a symbiosis, if you will. Each person of the Trinity is able to fulfill a distinct role because the mutual indwelling of the other two members, who both dissolve into the one and maintain the three. Thank you. I find this promising for environmental theology. It requires maintenance of self-boundaries and setting the ground rules of what Professor Wolff calls mutual personal interiority. These ground rules help us work toward a true affirmation of every human person by demanding our rejection of all social, political, and economic systems of relation which perpetuate injustice and the environmental catastrophes that are so integrally related to these injustices. And as we work to create whole human communities, I believe human individuals and cultures can emulate a healthy dialectical relationship with nature that is inspired by the relations of the Trinity. It's clear that nature has given, and that humans continue to take and take. So a central ethical question becomes, how can humans assist nature's need to withhold something for itself and thereby safeguard its, can we say, personhood? How can we make sure not to consume and exhaust that essential quality of nature which distinguishes it from human culture? When we fully appreciate the role of difference in the human-nature relationship, then and only then will we know what it means to say that humans and nature are inextricably linked.
I'd like to nominate Josh Ashton Hill for ecological president. So I just want to start out by saying that all my Catholic women in this audience can probably feel me when I'm saying that I'm standing in a pulpit on a Sunday morning. And I, too, want to say that I did prepare some comments, but this is also going to be from the gut, which is usually how I roll anyway. So I want to say, and I need to admit that I started out at this conference with a huge chip on my shoulder, and I've had it there for a while. And in fact, I would venture to say it's even the size of a boulder. One of the things that really frustrates me is that this generation, we're sort of forced to grapple with, deal with, mitigate, revitalize, reverse the damage that's been done by generations before us. Nobody asked us whether we wanted to take on this burden. Nobody said, hey, look, Rachel, your friends, we really apologize because we've done this to you. And so that really frustrates me, especially when people start to say, oh, let's have faith in the next generation. It's like, yeah, let's have faith in the next generation, but let's at least, I'll leave it at that. But one of the things that that I've really appreciated at this conference is that each and every one of you is working so very hard. You're working so very hard to lighten the load that I have, that Emily, Georgia, Josh, Matt, that we all have to bear as soon as we leave here and while we're here. And I also want to say, and this is a kudo to each and every one of you, that I have seen nothing but the utmost in compassion and kindness at this conference. And I woke up today like really stressing out about coming here to speak, and I just said, you know what, I've seen nothing but the best of humanity here. And that to me is so incredibly inspiring. And to give you an example, I mean, we all know that Professor Tucker and Grimm are just amazing, and I call them superhuman human beings. I really don't know how they're so superhuman. But I'll give you an example. My father was just about 2.5 weeks ago, was just hit by a car. And even with all these conference preparations and all the stress and bringing people from various walks of life and all what I would call rock stars, all of you are rock stars here, they emailed me several times to say, how's your dad doing? How's your mom doing? How are you doing? And that, to me, that's what Professor Tucker coined the phrase creative compassion. That's creative compassion. So I want to give them a round of applause. And without sounding like this is an Oscar speech or something, I also want to acknowledge my parents. And my mom is sitting right there, and I know she's going to get verklempt because she does. She always does. Wave, Mom. Both she and my dad taught me ever since I was a kid what it meant to give, what it meant to be selfless. I didn't mention it, but my father was actually hit when he was crossing the street to go to the second of 2 boys and girls clubs that he's been running. And he works and works and works, drives a school bus, runs bingo. He does the whole gamut of activities just to make sure that he's a positive role model in these children's lives. My mom is a school social worker, working so hard day after day to ensure that kids who have been forgotten by the system have an adequate education. That, to me, is inspiration. So now that I've thanked everybody and the students that have helped me, I've been getting a lot of credit all weekend for the decorations, but I want to point out Georgia, who did these amazing arrangements. I want to point out Emily, Jack Scott, who has been amazing. I want to point out just really everybody who's been, Freddie, everybody who's been there, Christy. They all deserve a round of applause too. So, amen. So there's a lot of parallels in my personal story and my comments today to those of my esteemed colleagues. And the first one that I'll start off with is that I had a little bit of an eco-terrorist incident when I was a child as well, although it really wasn't terrorism. But when I was in the 4th grade, there were actually still trees on my street. And they were large street trees, and I'll admit they tore up the pavement, but I loved it because I would ride my bike up and down the sidewalk, and I thought my bike was an all-terrain vehicle, going up and down. So needless to say, because of all this destruction to the sidewalk, the city came in and in a repavement effort decided to just rip out all the trees. And I went outside and started yelling, and so my mom, of course, had to take me away for the day because she thought for sure I was going to end up in jail. So I think that said, I don't want to give the impression that I grew up in a concrete jungle. Yes, it wasn't a farm. We didn't have the opportunity to hike, and I sort of lament that. But at the same time, my parents made sure that I had access to nature. We always had a garden in the backyard. My mom made sure I had an adequate supply of Tonka trucks. They took me on vacations to the Jersey Shore. We went up to Cape Cod. My mom gave me too much Dramamine, so I didn't hear the whale songs that I was supposed to have heard on the whale watch. Thanks, Mom. But thanks to Paul Winter last night, I heard him. Finally. And one of the things that was mentioned in my intro was that I was fortunate to be in the Buffalo Peaks Wilderness area in Colorado. Starting at 6th grade, my parents started sending me out to my aunt and uncle's cattle ranch in Colorado, where I learned how to ride School of Hard Knocks. And I learned some of the less than savory tasks that are involved in working on a ranch, namely rodent population control. And we can talk about that later. It's probably not too inspiring for this type of venue. But one of the summers we went out there, I was on a trail ride with my uncle, and we were riding through the Buffalo Peaks Wilderness area. And now you have to understand, my uncle's a retired Air Force colonel, and every time I go out there, I always get so what are they teaching you over in that liberal school? And there's always an assortment of dinner guests that come over and really enjoy kind of jumping on that bandwagon and jumping down my throat. But one summer, we were on this ride, and I remember I was holding up the rear, so it really was kind of an okay moment. I just burst out into tears. I really didn't know where they were coming from. And it just kept coming to my mind, there are so many people that I'm in classes with that are on my block that may and probably will never see what I'm seeing right now. And whether that's because they won't have the opportunity to travel, or whether that's because the trees are being taken down in their neighborhoods, there's something wrong with that. And so from that moment, I sort of realized there's something to be said for making sure that people have those opportunities, even if they can't travel. If they can't go to it, we ought to bring it to them. And that's kind of where I've been going with this. That's exactly why I've been so committed to doing what I call the dirt work. Thomas Berry has the great work. I believe it's the dirt work. Yes, I love dirt, soil, excuse me for the ecologists in the room. Sure, I will do 1 minute. I just, you know what, I sort of approached the relationship between religion and ecology in terms of the ethical connection or the ethical offerings that religions can offer to environmentalism. And, you know, just very briefly, well, I'll save that for another day if you're interested. I was actually diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was a relationship with my horse, who was also very sick at the time that I bought her, and nobody wanted her. She had lost her hair. I was losing my hair. So there was this relationship that formed between the two of us that actually showed me that there's more to the connection between spirituality and religious spirituality and ecology and our relationship to the environment. And I've kind of, I have to confess that I don't always understand that connection, much like Josh said. It's really hard to express that with language. But that's something that I'm working out every day. And in fact, Dean Speth's last comment last night about, you know, a new planet is not only possible, it's on its way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And that's kind of where I'm going in terms of the work that I do, breaking through concrete and asphalt to put in trees. That, to me, is peeling away the layers and allowing God's breath to come through the soil. And I just want to close with one little kind of event that happened in my life. My mentor, who first got me on this kick, Dr. Goff, who was the dean of the honors program at Cook, she passed away from pancreatic cancer. And I had the privilege of being at her bedside. And obviously, I still haven't gotten over it. I don't know if you do. But I remember telling her as she was gasping for air, I remember telling her, you know, you've inspired me so much, and you've done so much for me. I'm going to continue this work, and I'll make you proud. And I want to leave all of you knowing that we are committed to making you proud and to continuing your great work. So thank you, and thank you for having faith in us, because we definitely have faith in you.
Three very tough acts to follow. Thank you for your heart. It's a privilege to be part of this extraordinary gathering, and being asked to consider next steps is a very daunting challenge, given the achievements that have brought us here. It was so wonderful last night to hear the canyon echoes and Paul Winter's music, and I will be echoing many of the insights already raised. In so doing, I'd like to focus my remarks on the engagement of religious environmentalism with systemic social change, drawing on my experience as a theologian with the Earth Institute. The public role of religious environmentalism to engage public policy, enlist science, and critique economic practices is an extension of its mission for internal theological reform, and is similarly challenged by social forms of anthropocentrism. First, though, let me say from my perspective as a newer participant in honoring what has been done, that a massive mountain has been scaled by the work of the scholars, visionaries, and activists here who have enabled us through 20 years to see beyond many things. At least at the level of theological justification, I hope our traditions have come beyond dogmatic anthropocentrism, beyond the dominion problem. For the most part, I hope our society is beyond climate denial. Many of us may have felt tempted to stand on street corners with large signs and say, the earth is melting, the end is coming, but we don't need to do that anymore. As Barbara said, and as Bob Pollack, the director of the Center for the Study of Science and Religion where I am, has said, scientists are the new apocalyptics, and they are much more frightening. So the problem and the religious mandate to act is clear. But Anna Peterson's essay in the excellent volume Eco-Spirit raises the troubling point that explicitly stated values and reformed ideals do not necessarily lead to changed actions. The disjuncture of professed values and actual behavior is not limited to those basically uninterested in the environment or too distracted to focus on it. Even concerned and knowledgeable people have legitimate conflicting needs for their time and effort, and inadequate social options for implementing their values. So are we beyond theorizing? Are we beyond theologizing? No, but perhaps more direct theorizing about action is needed, drawing on sources such as decision analysis, risk perception, the emotional drivers of advocacy, and the social construction of needs and priorities. Have we come beyond lifestyle change? Several speakers, Claire especially yesterday, very powerfully spoke that we need to imagine a new world and thus bring it about, beginning with ourselves. We need to be personal and political, to do what we can in our place and continue the advocacy for structural change that many are doing. Being the change you want to see in the world is powerfully transformative. Furthermore, it is often seemingly the only thing one can actually control. And we know it's not enough. Large-scale reductions in greenhouse gases require public and structural global changes in policies, technologies, and economic systems. The Bali Convention called for the next global treaty to be crafted by the world's governments by 2009, but it is largely corporations and industries that will implement it and determine its effectiveness. At the same time, it is unlikely that this country will ratify or implement policies for industry without leadership based in religious values that is prepared for resistance. Our social fabric is based on the individualism inherent in liberal government and free market economies, which Robert Bellah described as designed to mediate self-interest. Perhaps this underlies the apparent ambivalence of many religious leaders about how to challenge the culture and how to challenge their congregations, though they have a unique leverage for this mission, and it is uniquely their mission. Nonetheless, there is reason to hope that the religious voice is and will be welcomed, as you spoke. Many of you have seen the news clipping from the UN Environmental Program, which said that on a wish list of 50 things to save the planet, a religious ecological coalition was the number 2 item. If at one time environmentalism was considered a personal expression of one's individual spirituality, now the discourse is shifting to environmentalism as a social obligation to protect another's human rights. Another sign of hope is that scientists, as well as advocates, are challenging the presumption that science is value-free and innocent of implications. As Gavin Schmidt of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies notes, scientists are realizing their responsibility to communicate in language the laity can understand and refusing to be thereby labeled a politicized scientist. In terms of economics, as Roger said so strongly yesterday, the religious voice has a historically consistent charge to critique economic systems. Even Jeff Sachs of the Earth Institute and the Millennium Village Project, who is first and foremost a market economist, is poignantly aware of the plight of the desperately poor. He emphasizes that market forces alone will not establish a sustainable world economy in places of desperate poverty. So as a thought experiment, can we consider two very practical structural problems that offer a novel opportunity for religious leadership? I mean the patent system and coal power. At the Global Roundtable on Climate Change last month, corporate leaders discussed with some ambivalence the barriers represented by the patent system, which protects profit and research investment, but also prevents impoverished societies from accessing patented green technologies. Dr. James Hansen, climate scientist and director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, has said that the single most important thing to do is to stabilize carbon dioxide emissions below 385 parts per million or below 350 by phasing out all dirty coal plants and only using clean power in the next 10 years. How might the religious coalition advocate for equity in technology access? How might religious environmentalism create a bold and calculated strategy to reach the radical goal of global power transformation on the necessary scale and in the necessary time frame? One critical religious resource is the ability to rethink and confront sacrifice. Sacrifice need not be primarily about loss. It is about centering on our most beloved and critical values, on owning the freedom to prioritize them above all else. Sacrifice is not about neglecting oneself, but about confirming identity as related to others, as established by how we give of ourselves to them. Sacrifice is a means for enacting the courage to reimagine our identity as members of the planetary community and insist that a green earth is the pearl of greatest price. Sacrifice in this sense is a gift of clarity and focus. The good news is that many, many people are already doing this work, largely due to the leadership in this room, which are sacraments of hope. Religion and ecology has been called an emerging field. I think it has emerged. There continue to be new theological challenges. A Navajo leader with whom I spoke in the course of my research put it this way: we need new songs. We don't have a song for closing a coal plant or a nuclear plant on the reservation. At the same time, many new songs have been written. Scholarship has flourished. There are wonderful guidelines and resources on virtually every tradition's homepage, on the websites of religious environmental coalitions and many other partnerships. The task now seems to be mystagogy, or to put it another way, marketing. We need more preaching. Films like Renewal are invaluable tools for inspiring others. Expanding scientific literacy is necessary to give people the motivation to seek out and download these resources. As Augustine said, we are what we love, and we can only love what we know. Thankfully, as all of your work has testified, the loving awareness of our cosmic interdependence is becoming widespread. In the research I'm now doing, many people speak of a new relationship with living ecosystems. I was particularly struck by one man who spoke of a new sense of relationship with the inanimate world. So our definition of community and who is the neighbor is radically expanding. To conclude, in terms of political hope, climate impact scientist Cynthia Rosenzweig observed that it's been only 20 years since NASA Goddard Institute first raised concern about climate, and already global treaties are underway. Theologically, we know that hope is not of ourselves alone. The covenant with Noah never specified that humankind might not unleash a great flood. Our evident capacity for destructiveness is clear. However, humanity cannot destroy God's being as creator. God's loving will to be creator holds a depth of holiness and renewal that human ignorance and injustice cannot take away. This trust does not allow us to rest, but will light our next steps as co-creators.
I think this is on. I want to express deep thanks around, and with this lovely breeze that's blowing across the day. I saw a robin cross the road yesterday and made me feel like spring freshness. So that's what I want to, from my heart to your heart, as you travel today. You know, it's just a good feeling, a good spring, and a good blessing as you are on your way. Three things come to my mind as I think about this look forward. With Thomas Berry and a friend who's here today, Brian Brown, we had a golden year in 1978. We were together at Riverdale Center. I was working on a dissertation. Brian was working on his work on the Tathagata Garbha, one of those beautiful books that I still consult to this day on the womb of the Buddha nature that brings forth the world. During that time, we would have conversations with Thomas Berry about some of his ideas going forward. And quite often he would draw on his teacher, one of his teachers in text, Jean-Baptiste Vico, and the New Science. Vico was contesting the position of Newton especially, and the particular vision of an emerging scientific objectivity. Vico's address was the human capacity to make a world. He saw it as ages. So Vico had a deep historical vision. You can see where Thomas Berry then ties that vision of Vico together with Teilhard, his introduction through Teilhard to universe emergence. So he sees in the emergent universe a sense of ages. And he would articulate from this combination of thought his sense of the ecozoic age. So his idea of an ecological vision and the sense of the end of the Cenozoic and the beginning of the Ecozoic. He was trying to express something that affected all of life. He was again drawing on Vico's understanding that when the age changes, everything changes. The male woman will no longer deliver the mail in the same way. We will no longer make the apple strudel in the same way. Speakers who hold these devices will no longer do it in the same way. We're at such a moment, I think, as we go forward. The ecozoic was Tom Berry's way of expressing it, but he was also very much aware, painfully aware of another insight of Vico into this mythic dynamic. The point that Vico wanted to speak when that age that is passing gives way to a new age, Vico articulated it as a barbarism of reflection. That the old dimming age, which was itself so incredibly new and vital, as it dimmed down, sharpened itself into this barbarism of reflection. We know that, I think. We see it in our own time. I sense the the agony of that reflection, we are called to see the description the other day of the prophets of our times simply telling us what they're seeing in the world, the way the world now appears. This barbarism of reflection obviously prompted Barry, and so much of his rhetoric comes out of that, of inside of Vico. We're not a collection of objects. You can feel it in that kind of rhetoric. And the ecozoic, we're a communion of subjects. He was groping in his own tradition for some way to talk about that. My final point is to draw out what I see in our way forward in that vision that Thomas gave to so many of us. And Mary Evelyn and I will see him next week, and we'll sit down and look at some of the programs and say, Thomas, you know, this person and that person, and we remember the students to him, and we'll sit and talk about the ecozoic for a moment. And I'll try to express to him what I want to impart to you, the deep affect, the capacity for the ecozoic to activate in the human a deep affection for the range of being. That affection as close as our own hands. That affection that realizes this hand that has been with me 61 years, it's a good friend. And I know that the opposable thumb connects me to those creatures that I cannot imagine when I lay my head down and I'm grasping for breath that they might be gone from this planet. I cannot accept that. I cannot imagine that. So it's part of what I want this hand to reach out to the next generation. Our simian cousins, I want that opposable thumb, that graspable capacity in my hand, that we share that, those creatures to go forward. These carbon atoms do not come from this earth. So that sense of the reaching out of this hand across the stardust, the supernova ejecta, the elemental structure of my hand connects me into that larger story. So Tom Berry was after an affection which had this a deep, thoughtful or a critical component to it, but without that deep affection for the world. It's simply caught in that barbarism of reflection. So those thoughts I wanted to send along with you as you go, but really, most of all, the little breeze today. I hope.
Wow. The only thing I've missed this morning are Kleenex. How about you? And also, I'm never wearing boots again to impress the younger generation. Whitney, you know. I want to, what can you say? But I do want to say a few things about future directions, and then I want to conclude with some honoring, because this is what this whole conference has been about, honoring the amazing work of so many people here. So let me just give this list and offer it into our presence as a sense of the continuities, many that will come out of this, many we will never know, the networking, the friendships, the deep hope that is totally, totally renewed, I think, for so many of us. But we will help with networking. We will help with listservs and addresses and all these things that I know you would like and we would like too. We have given these materials in your packets of Bill McKibben's book of what we can do as individuals, and that wonderful book from the Pacific Northwest Institute of Dick and Jean Roy of the problems and also what we can do. So those are offerings for ourselves and as individuals. But especially as community people, I think this film has been such a centerpiece of this conference and as such a source of hope. The tremendous work of Terry and Marty for so many years, and we know it will be used in many, many ways, and the ways that we can help that, each one of us here, I think, will be another gift, another offering into this huge, beautiful bowl. Yes, yes, yes. And the initiative that's coming of the greening of seminaries that Laurel is leading, and Beth and Rick and so on, this new moment to say seminaries and colleges and universities, what Bobby did yesterday, this greening, greening, greening. I sat next to Chris Sawyer, the director, whatever you call, of their board of trustees here at Yale Divinity School. And he said, why should Yale Divinity School not be leading this movement all across the campus, but a light for other divinity schools? There's no reason why not. We have people who want this to happen from the outside, pushing. And that's what we need to respond to. The greening of seminaries can happen. We can all participate in it. The Food, Farming, and Faith initiative that Rick and others are leading, this whole sense of how we eat, the health of our children, of future generations, that will go forward. We hope to do something on animals and ethics here with the help of the Center for Bioethics next year, and that is something of our brothers and sisters in the great species of being, and maybe even a council of beings would be so fabulous to do. The Canadian Forum on Religion and Ecology has been such wonderful partners, and we look forward to working with you, maybe in a seminar on Thomas Berry's work and other kinds of things, so that too will be coming out. The secondary school, the teachers in the high schools who are so free of their curriculum vitas and what's their next article and so on, and they are there in the trenches willing to do this work, and we need to be with them and help them and translate this material outward from its scholarly context into next generation's context. And at Yale, certainly with Willis and others, we hope to strengthen this degree, to strengthen the program. You see a certain seeding here. The flowers are still to be seen, very much so, and we need your help in that. This is a very, talk about a political task. At Forestry, the secret is humanities are part of forestry and environmental studies. This is quite a politically intense move. It's really fascinating. Lots of work to be done, tons of work to be done. One of the wonderful things I think that Willis will lead is an encyclopedia on religion and sustainability, which will connect this work to the huge movement in sustainability internationally and nationally. And I think this will be so helpful. And we hope maybe to do a small colloquium on this topic of sustainability and religion as well. The Harvard books are being translated into other languages. In China, the Confucianism and the Taoist and Buddhism will be available soon. The Deputy Prime Minister for the Environment is asking for an environmental ethics that looks Chinese, and that's what we hope to do over the next few years, have some conferences there. The scholarly community is very, very eager for this to happen. And also in India, these two, huge, huge modernizing forces on the planet. And one of the things that we'll share with you, and it might be another event in the future, is this, in addition to this wonderful film on renewal, the Universe Story film that we're working on with Brian Swim and the director of the Cosmos series, to give this story its first large iteration with beautiful pictures, visuals, music, and so on, that will be an inspiration as well for this profound interconnectedness. So those are some of the things that will come out, and we look forward to hearing from you as to ways in which we can assist future projects and the promise that lies here. But I want to conclude with what we've witnessed, I think, so gratifyingly here, but throughout the conference, is this intergenerational, I like to say an intergenerational handshake to the students, to the children that are here, and so on. But students and alums have been a very important part of this process. And I said last night, I will cry when I think of my students, and I have over and over again. But isn't this an amazing group, what you saw this morning? And Freddie, and Georgia, and Emily, and, on and on and on. We are so blessed. I think we've arrived in the pure land, as the Buddhists say. This is truly amazing. And what's so amazing is that I go into class, sometimes I'm reading these things over, and sometimes I'm even up in the middle of the night worrying about the Narmada Dam in India. I go into this class, and I'm like, and I sit back, and I keep saying, we have to say this, we have to say this. The students say it. You can't imagine the intuition, the sensibilities, some of them not even taking courses in the Asian religion, negotiating what Buddhism is saying and Hinduism is saying and how it connects, and saying, of my experience in Thailand, I can understand why ordaining of trees. These students are amazing. They are such an inspiration. John and I, we come out of the class like, this is incredible. Seriously, and it's such an amazing feeling for us. Because you know what? We have to share in our generation our despair and our hope. And that's the intergenerational handshake. That's what it is about. We have to say, we are as nervous as you are, even speaking, and we can do it together. To take that boulder off your back, to put it on the ground, and somehow to trust that the ground will hold all of us. The ground will hold all of us. But we are truly in this together. And so how can we ever conclude something like that? But I do want to say that we are honoring alums, and I think Barbara wasn't here the other night when your name was called out, but we want to honor what was represented in Janet's talk, this movement that you have helped us understand from Apocalypse to Genesis. And as a graduate from Yale, that movement from Apocalypse to Genesis is exactly what we're celebrating today. So we want to give you one of these clocks to celebrate renewing hope. So we've got students, we've got alums, and we've got ancestors to be. And I want to bring into this mix the ancestor to be, of course, that has been one of the reasons that we are able to do what we are doing. It's certainly Teilhard de Chardin, and it is very much Thomas Berry. And Thomas, who is now in his early 90s, still going strong, editing this next volume with him, and so on. But I think what he has helped to bring into this mix, is both the quality of scholarship that's represented by so many in this room, but also the capacity for contemplation, the capacity to say prayer matters, the capacity to say meditation, interiority, will sustain us, will sustain this movement. And that's a difficult thing to do in academia. But that's why these alliances are so critical. And that's why we want to conclude here by bringing the spirit of Thomas Berry into the room, by bringing this amazing force, more than a force of nature, a force of the universe. And I want to honor two people who have kept these wings of the scholarly contribution and the contemplative contribution. So from the scholarly side, we'd very much like Steve Dunn from the University of Toronto to come forward, who has educated Steve has educated the next generation in Canada. Many of his students are here, more than a dozen PhDs, and the Inspiration in Canada and in North America has been so much due to Steve, who in his gentle, modest, and unassuming way has been a force of nature. May you continue, and may your church, the first green church in North America, thrive.
It's fun to be a celebrated fossil.
And because that ritual this morning was so amazing, and because we understand that ritual and contemplation and prayer really do matter, and it's okay to bring that into the midst, we want to honor the founding of the Green Mountain Monastery in Thomas's name, and with that sense that the prayers there are sustaining all of us in very, very special ways. So Gail Warcello and Bernadette would love you to come forward for the Green Mountain Monastery in Vermont. So I think there's no more words, are there? But I can't tell you how happy we are, all of you who've come, some from a great distance, and we look forward to keeping in touch with this great family. We have not had children, and this is why the next generation are our children. It wasn't by choice, but I think it was by providence. And this is what matters so much to us. One final thanks to Nancy Clavins, who's been with us from the very beginning, and her wonderful husband, Dick. We wouldn't be here without them either. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. So, song will lift us out. Song will take us up. Kathleen Degnan, please join this party. Thank you.
John said that we need new songs, and we began this morning's conversation speaking about the book of Revelation. And there's an invitation in the book of Revelation to see the world anew. So I thank wherever this song came from. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let all who hear their voices say, come. Come to the wedding of earth and heaven. Come to the feast of fire marries the sea. In the great consummation of all of creation, with the body of divinity, the Spirit and the bride say, let all who hear their voices say, come, come to the wedding of earth and heaven, come to the feast of life. Sun weds the moon weds the stars wed the dark fields of empty space, and all forms of being are bathed in the love light, the rapturous glow of the hidden face. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Can you echo that? The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let all who hear their voices say, come, come to the wedding of earth and heaven, come to the feast of light. We are the fruit of God's seed, sown in the womb of all becoming. Our original face is the beauty and grace of the divine beloved. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let all who hear their voices say, come, come to the wedding of earth and heaven, come to the feast of life. All beings partake of the feast, all taste the bread of this communion. So join in the dance, move in the trance of this ecstatic union. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let all